I once thought there was nothing crueler than death, until the day I saw my wife, the woman I'd given my entire life to save, holding hands with another man, calling it her new happiness. That day, I had only a few coins in my pocket and a 4-year-old child in my arms. But from those ashes I rebuilt my life. And when she came back kneeling and begging to rekindle our relationship, I just smiled. Because now I was the one who decided who was worthy of staying. Hello, my name is Luca Rhodes. I'm 31 years old, living in Mason City, Iowa, a quiet little town with long, stretching roads, endless cornfields, and windy afternoons. I'm not one for talking about myself, but if I had to, I'd say I'm just an ordinary mechanic, running a small garage on the outskirts of town. My garage isn't anything grand, just an old warehouse filled with tools I've collected over the years, but it's my entire world. There I repair and fabricate construction equipment, from excavators to concrete mixers. I'm not rich, but I take pride in the fact that these hands of mine have never let anyone down. And above all, I have a family, a home that to me is everything. I met Haley, my wife, in my 3rd year of college. She was 2 years younger than me, but sometimes I felt like she was an entire universe I could never fully understand. Haley was beautiful, the kind of beauty that made heads turn. Her golden hair shimmered like sunlight, her blue eyes were crystal clear, and her smile could melt any heart. Back then, she was the dream of every guy on campus, but for some reason, she chose me. A plain, quiet guy who buried himself in books and occasionally stole glances at her from the corner of the library. I didn't have poetic words or expensive gifts, but I made Haley one promise. I would dedicate my life to making her happy. And I kept that promise, at least until now. We got married right after she graduated college in a simple ceremony at the small town church. No lavish party, no $1,000 wedding dress, just happy gazes and vows to be together forever. 2 years later, Milo was born. That boy was a miracle to me. He's sharp, mischievous, always running around on his tiny legs, but his heart is enormous. Every time Milo wrapped his arms around my neck and called out, "Daddy," in his clear, bright voice, all my exhaustion melted away. To me, Milo isn't just my son. He's the reason I wake up every morning, the light in the long, dragging afternoons at the garage. Our house sits on the edge of town, a small wooden home with a white picket fence weathered by time. It's not luxurious, lacking modern conveniences, but it's home, the place where I feel most at peace. In front of the house is a small lawn where Milo often plays, chasing a ball or rolling on the grass, laughing uncontrollably. In the garage, I set up a little workbench where I fix machinery and meticulously carve wooden toys for Milo. His favorite is a little truck I made for his 3rd birthday. He hugs it every night as if it's his most precious treasure. Every morning I wake up early brewing coffee for myself and Haley. She always prepares breakfast, toast, fried eggs, sometimes bacon if we're feeling a little flush. I take Milo to preschool and he sits in the back, chattering endlessly about everything from a butterfly he saw in the yard to a dream about a singing dinosaur. Those little moments always make me smile. In the evenings, the 3 of us gather around the dinner table. Our table is nothing special, just an old wooden one. But when Haley laughs, when Milo tells stories about his day with his eyes sparkling, I feel like I'm holding the whole world in my hands. Our life wasn't wealthy, but it was full of joy. I believed I had everything. But not everyone saw it that way, especially my in-laws, Caden and Emery Collins. They come from a well-off family. Caden is a successful real estate businessman, owning expensive apartments and valuable land across Iowa. Emery runs an art gallery in the city center, a place only the wealthy dare step into. To them, I was just the mechanic, an uneducated, undistinguished man, unworthy of their golden daughter. From the day Haley said she wanted to marry me, I saw the disdain in their eyes. Caden once looked me up and down and asked bluntly, "You plan to support my daughter with a few wrenches and hammers?" Emery was more subtle, but her sharp-tongued remarks cut deeper than any knife. Haley could have married a lawyer, a doctor, or at least someone with ambition. she once said right in front of me as if I were invisible. I didn't blame them. I understood that for a family like the Collinses, I was a hard pill to swallow. Haley could have lived in luxury, taken European vacations, attended extravagant parties. But she chose me, and that made me cherish her even more. Haley never complained about our modest home or the days at the end of the month when we had to stretch every penny to buy milk for Milo. She still smiled, still held my hand, and said that as long as she had me and Milo, she was content. Our love was strong, enough to withstand the whispers and judgmental stares. Though Caden and Emery reluctantly accepted me as their son-in-law, every meeting with them was a challenge. The rare dinners at their house were filled with comparisons. James, my friend's son, just bought a mansion in California, Caden would say, glancing at me. And you, Luca, how's that garage of yours doing? Still holding up? I'd just nod, swallowing the words I wanted to say because I knew he never respected me. Those days, though imperfect, were the best of my life. I worked, sweat soaking my shirt, but coming home to Milo running to hug my legs, to Haley standing at the door with her gentle smile, I knew I was living a dream. My garage wasn't big, but it was enough to provide for my family. I didn't dream of skyscrapers or shiny cars. To me, happiness was taking Milo to school in the mornings, his laughter as I pushed him on the swing I built, or the moment Haley rested her head on my shoulder at sunset. I thought as long as I could hold on to these things, I wouldn't need anything more. But life, as I came to realize, is never as simple as we hope. The happiness I held so tightly in my hands turned out to be more fragile than I imagined. And then, one day, everything changed. Not gradually, but suddenly, like a storm crashing through a clear sky. It was a late autumn afternoon, the air in Mason City cool and crisp, with pale golden sunlight stretching across the dry cornfields. I was in the garage, sweat soaking through my shirt, hands stained with machine oil. The screeching sound of the metal grinder filled the air, mingling with the sharp smell of burning iron. I had just finished repairing an excavator for Mr. Thompson, a regular customer. Wiping my hands on a tattered rag, I smiled, thinking of Milo, my boy, probably waiting for me at home, eager to play on the swing. Haley had gone to the city to meet an old friend and said she'd be back before dinner. I was planning to make her favorite mashed potatoes so we could gather as a family. Then my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Frowning, I wiped the sweat from my forehead and answered. The woman's voice on the other end was urgent, cold, like she was reading a formal announcement. "Is this Luca Rhodes? Your wife, Haley, has been in an accident. She's at Mason City Hospital. You need to come immediately." The words hit me, but I couldn't process them. An accident? Haley? My mind went blank. I managed to stammer, How is she? The woman's voice remained emotionless. "It's very serious. You need to get here now." The wrench in my hand clattered to the floor with a loud clang. My head spun as if the world had just crumbled beneath my feet. Haley, my wife, the woman I loved more than life itself, this couldn't be happening. I stumbled out of the garage, my hands shaking so badly I could barely open the car door. I called Susan, our neighbor, my voice breaking. "Susan, can you watch Milo for me? I have to get to the hospital. Haley, she's been in an accident." Susan, alarmed, told me to go and that she'd take care of him. I don't remember how I drove, only that I floored the gas pedal like a madman on the road into town, my heart tightening with every second. The image of Haley that morning, standing at the door, waving with her radiant smile, kept flashing in my mind. "Don't do this, Haley," I muttered, tears welling up. "Don't leave me." Mason City Hospital loomed before me, a stark white building, cold and unwelcoming in the fading light of dusk. I burst into the lobby, my heart pounding, feeling like my feet weren't touching the ground. I shouted, my voice hoarse, "My wife, Haley, where is she?" All eyes turned to me, but I didn't care. At the reception desk, a nurse looked up, her eyes flickering with pity. She pointed down the hall, her voice soft but tense. "She's in the emergency room, sir." I ran, my oil-stained boots slipping on the tiled floor, my heart thumping as if it would burst from my chest. At the door to the emergency room, I nearly collapsed. Through a small gap in the curtain, I saw Haley. My wife, the woman who had been the light of my life, lay motionless on the hospital bed. She was wrapped in white bandages, tubes, and IV lines protruding from her body, her face pale, almost lifeless. I gripped the doorframe tightly, trying to stop myself from screaming. "Haley," I whispered, my voice choking. "Don't scare me like this." Then the emergency room door swung open. A middle-aged doctor stepped out, his face stern and tense. He pulled me aside, his voice low but clear. "Mr. Rhodes, your wife's condition is critical. She has multiple fractures, severe internal injuries, and significant blood loss. We need to operate immediately or—" He hesitated, but I knew what he meant. "Or she wouldn't make it through the night." My legs felt like they were giving out, but I nodded, my voice raspy. "Do it. Save her no matter what it takes." The doctor looked at me, a trace of sympathy in his eyes. "This surgery is very expensive, Mr. Rhodes. Insurance won't cover it all. Are you sure?" I cut him off. "I'll figure it out. Just save her, please." I signed a stack of papers, the numbers on them blurring before my eyes. The cost of the emergency treatment was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, a sum I'd never even dreamed of. But I didn't hesitate. Haley was everything. If I had to sell the world to keep her alive, I would. I sank into a chair in the hallway, clutching my head, trying to breathe without losing my mind. Milo's face flashed in my mind, playing innocently at Susan's house, unaware that his mother was fighting for her life. I wanted to hold him, to tell him his mom would be okay, but I wasn't sure. All I could do was pray, repeating over and over in my head, "Haley, you have to be strong. For me. For Milo." The days that followed were a nightmare. Haley lay in the ICU while I began selling everything I could. My old pickup truck, my faithful companion for years, I sold to a guy from the next town for a pitiful price. I remembered the day I bought that truck, Haley sitting beside me, smiling brightly as I took it for a test drive around Mason City. Now it was just a bargaining chip to keep her alive. I sold the garage too. Every machine, every wrench was my sweat and dreams. But I didn't hesitate. I called a broker and signed the papers to sell the garage in the pouring rain one afternoon, tears mixing with the rain on my face. I even took off my wedding ring. That ring, I'd worn it since the day I married Haley, promising to keep it with me forever. I brought it to the pawn shop, my hands trembling as I placed it on the counter. The shop owner looked at me with pity. "You sure about this, Luca? This is your wedding ring, a keepsake." I just nodded, unable to speak. I needed the money. I needed Haley to live. I went to the bank trying to secure a loan despite having nothing valuable to use as collateral. The bank employee looked at me with sympathy. "Are you sure you want to sign for this loan? The interest rates are high." I replied softly. "I don't have any other choice." During those days, my in-laws, Caden and Emery, came to the hospital. I hoped they'd offer some comfort, some support. But I was wrong. Caden strode in, his expensive suit pristine, his eyes sharp as knives. "You let my daughter end up like this," he said, his voice dripping with blame. "If you hadn't made her live in that rundown house, she wouldn't have been out on those dangerous roads." Emery didn't speak as directly, but her gaze hurt more than words. "Haley deserved a better life," she whispered loud enough for me to hear. Their words cut into my heart like a blade, but I stayed silent. I had no strength to argue, no time to defend myself. My entire focus was on Haley, on the IV tubes, on the beeping heart monitor in the ICU. Every night I sat by Haley's bedside, holding her cold hand. I told her about Milo, about the drawings he made at school, about how he kept asking me to make him another toy truck. "You have to live, Haley," I whispered. "Milo needs you. I need you." Sometimes I thought I saw her fingers twitch, but it was probably just my imagination. I was exhausted, but I didn't dare sleep. I was afraid that if I closed my eyes, I'd lose her forever. Milo, my innocent boy, didn't fully understand what was happening. I picked him up from Susan's house, forcing a smile so he wouldn't worry. "Mom's resting at the hospital, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. "She'll be home soon." He nodded, but his eyes were full of questions. "Is Mom in pain, Dad?" he asked in his tiny voice. I hugged him tightly, swallowing my tears. "Mom's strong, kiddo. She'll be okay." But deep down, I wasn't sure. All I knew was that no matter what it took, I would do everything to keep Haley alive, to keep our little family whole. The days following Haley's surgery were an exhausting blur, as if I were running a race with no finish line in sight. I was drained, both physically and mentally. But every time I looked at Haley lying in her hospital bed, I told myself I had to stay strong. She had crossed the line between life and death, and I couldn't let myself fall apart. Haley was moved from the emergency room to the ICU. In those early days, she remained unconscious, her face pale as wax, with only the steady beeping of the heart monitor keeping me company. I sat by her bedside, holding her cold hand, whispering words of encouragement. "You're so strong, Haley," I said, unsure if she could hear me. "You have to wake up for Milo, for me." I barely left the hospital, only stepping away to pick up Milo or grab essentials from home. Each time I left, it felt like I was leaving a piece of my heart behind. Milo, my 4-year-old, was too young to fully grasp what was happening. I brought him to the hospital every day after preschool, and he sat quietly by his mother's bed, drawing childlike pictures with his crayons. His drawings were full of whimsical shapes, smiling suns, tiny houses, and images of his parents holding hands. "Mom will get better when she sees my drawings, right, Dad?" he asked, his big round eyes sparkling with hope. I smiled, ruffling his hair, though my heart twisted in pain. "That's right, buddy. She's going to love them." I didn't want Milo to see my worry, didn't want him to feel the fear gnawing at his father. To Milo, I tried to be the strong dad who could fix anything, from machines to the wounds in our hearts. In those days, I finally called my parents, Tiago and Amara. I had put it off, not wanting to worry them, but I couldn't keep it hidden any longer. When I heard my mother's voice over the phone, I tried to stay calm, but within a few sentences, my voice broke. "Haley, she was in an accident, Mom. I've sold everything to save her." My mother sobbed on the other end, her voice trembling. "Luca, my boy, why didn't you tell us sooner?" "I'm coming right away." My father, with his warm but firm tone, chimed in. "You have to be strong, Luca. You're the pillar of this family. Haley will be okay, and you have to be okay too." Their words were like a cool breeze, soothing my soul amidst the storm of those endless days. I didn't cry in front of them, but after hanging up, I sat silently in a corner of the hospital, tears streaming down my face. I wasn't weak, but I was tired, and my parents were the only ones I could let myself be vulnerable with, even if just for a moment. I believed that this tragedy, though painful, would strengthen the bond between Haley and me. I imagined the day she'd wake up and we'd hold hands, starting over. I had lost the truck, the garage, even my wedding ring, but I still had Haley and Milo. As long as they were with me, I could rebuild everything. I dreamed of the days we'd fix up our little house together, laughing around the dinner table like before. I thought, if we could overcome death, nothing could tear us apart. After a few weeks, a miracle happened. Haley woke up. She was weak at first, only able to speak a few words, but her eyes were brighter. I nearly broke down when I heard her voice, hoarse and tired. "Luca, thank you." I held her hand, grinning like an idiot, tears streaming down my face. "You don't need to thank me, Haley. Just get better, that's enough." The doctor said she'd need time to recover, but she was out of danger. I let out a sigh of relief, feeling the weight on my shoulders lighten slightly. A few days later, after final medical checks, Haley was discharged and I brought her back to our little house, now emptier from the things I'd sold. But I didn't care. I believed that as long as I had Haley and Milo, I could do anything. In those first days at home, I cared for Haley meticulously. I cooked porridge, reminded her to take her medication, and helped her take small steps as she regained her strength. Milo was always by her side, showing off his new drawings. "Look, Mom, I drew Dad too," he chirped, pointing to a figure with oversized hands. Haley smiled, but I began to notice that her smile wasn't as warm as it used to be. Gradually, she spoke less, laughed less, and her gaze often avoided mine. I thought maybe she was tired. Maybe the accident had changed her. I tried to be patient, caring for her even more attentively, cooking her favorite meals, telling funny stories to make her laugh. But Haley's coldness grew more apparent. She spent a lot of time on her phone, her fingers moving quickly across the screen, then hiding it when I entered the room. Once I caught her smiling softly at a text, a smile I hadn't seen since she woke up. I told myself it was just friends, maybe someone from the city, but a sense of unease began to grow in me, like a small thorn piercing my heart. One evening I saw Haley sitting on the sofa, her eyes distant, staring out the window. She wasn't watching Milo playing nearby or me washing dishes in the kitchen. She looked far away, as if waiting for someone, as if her mind was no longer here. I tried to push the feeling aside, telling myself she just needed time to recover from the trauma. I had saved her from the jaws of death, given up everything to keep her alive. How could I doubt her? But the thorn in my heart grew larger, and I began to fear that what I was about to face would hurt more than those days in the hospital. Then one night, everything shattered. I had just put Milo to bed, kissing his forehead and telling him the story of the flying dinosaur he loved. As I stepped out of his room, I heard Haley's voice, soft but clear, coming from the living room. She was on the phone, her tone gentle, almost enamored. "I miss you. I can't wait any longer." I froze behind the door, feeling like the world was collapsing around me. My heart pounded, but my feet felt nailed to the floor. I wanted to walk in, to demand what was going on, but I couldn't. I just stood there, listening to her words, each one cutting into my heart like a knife. Everything I had sacrificed, the truck, the garage, my wedding ring, the dreams I'd built, suddenly seemed meaningless. The next day, I couldn't hold it in any longer. Milo was napping, his soft, even breaths coming from the next room. In our small kitchen, with sunlight spilling across the table, I sat across from Haley. My hands clasped tightly, sweat beading on my palms. I looked into her eyes, my voice hoarse. "Haley, is there something you're hiding from me?" I hoped she'd give a small laugh, say, "You're overthinking things," like she used to. I hoped she'd offer some explanation, even a reluctant one that I could cling to. But Haley looked up, her eyes cold as steel, without a trace of hesitation or guilt. "You really want the truth, Luca? Fine. I can't do this anymore. I'm tired of this poverty, this cramped house, this life. You're not the man I need anymore. I've had enough." Each word was like a hammer striking my chest. I looked at her, the woman I'd loved since college, the one I'd sold everything for, even gone hungry to save, and I no longer recognized her. What are you saying, Haley?" I stammered, my throat dry. Haley stood, the chair scraping with a chilling sound. She turned away, her voice calm but ruthless. "I've met someone else. He can give me things you never could." A month later, when her wounds had fully healed, she packed her bags. No apology, no goodbye. Just the sound of her suitcase wheels rolling across the tile and the faint scent of her familiar perfume lingering for the last time. I stood at the door, holding Milo in my arms, watching Haley climb into a sleek car parked at the gate. The man in the driver's seat didn't even glance my way. Later, I learned he was a wealthy businessman she'd known even before the accident. Now they appeared together openly, hand in hand, her radiant smile captured in social media photos, as if Milo and I had never existed. The pain inside me was like a wild beast roaring and clawing. I had lost Haley, the woman I loved since our college days, the one I thought would be by my side until the end. I lost my truck, my garage, the dream I built from nothing with my own 2 hands. But more than anything, I lost my faith. Love, which I once believed was unshakable, was now just a gaping wound bleeding every time I thought of her. I looked at Milo, his small face peaceful in sleep, and my heart twisted in agony. "Where's Mom, Dad?" he asked me one afternoon, his clear, innocent eyes full of questions. I didn't know how to answer. I just pulled him into my arms, swallowing my tears. "Mom's away on business for a while, buddy," I said, my voice choking. How could I tell a 4-year-old that his mother had chosen another man, another life, and left us behind like discarded relics? My in-laws, Caden and Emery Collins, didn't make things any easier. I had thought, despite their lifelong disdain for me, that they might at least show some sympathy when they saw their daughter abandon her husband and child. But I was wrong. One afternoon they came to the house saying they wanted to talk about Haley. I hoped they'd bring advice or some comfort, but within minutes I realized they had come for something else. Caden sat stiffly in the chair, his voice cold as if delivering a verdict. "Have you ever wondered why Haley left you, Luca? A man who can't provide for his wife and child doesn't deserve pity." I was stunned. I did everything for her. I sold the truck, the garage. He cut me off, his eyes dripping with contempt. "You call that everything? You forced my daughter to suffer, to live in poverty. She deserves more happiness than you could ever give her, and at least now she has someone who can." Emery remained silent, but the way she looked at me, a mix of pity and scorn, hurt more than his words. As they left, she said softly, but with a cutting edge, "Haley had her reasons, Luca. Don't blame her." The door closed, leaving me standing in the empty room, my fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. I didn't argue, didn't fight back. I just felt hollow. I had lost my wife, my family, and now even my dignity had been trampled. But the ordeal didn't end there. Life seemed determined to test my limits. One freezing winter night, Milo fell ill. He was burning with a high fever, curled up on the old bed in the cramped rented room we'd moved to after I could no longer afford our old house. We had left behind the little home with the lawn where Milo used to play, as the bank loans and Haley's medical bills had drained every penny I had. This rented room with its peeling walls and creaking windows was all I could afford. I held Milo, feeling his small body radiating heat, his eyes closed, lips dry and cracked. "Dad, I'm tired," he whispered, and my heart felt like it was being crushed. I wrapped him in a thin blanket and rushed out into the biting wind, running to the nearest clinic because I no longer had a car. The streets of Mason City were dark, the wind howling through the alleys, but I didn't feel the cold. I only felt fear. Fear of losing Milo. Fear of losing the only thing I had left. At the clinic, the doctor examined Milo, his voice grave. "The boy has a high fever and signs of an infection. He needs medication and tests immediately." He handed me a long list of prescriptions. But when I stood at the counter and opened my wallet, all I found were a few crumpled bills. I stood frozen, my hands trembling as I counted the coins, trying to see if I could afford even half the medicine. I'll come back for the rest," I told the pharmacist, my voice breaking. She looked at me with pity but said nothing. I left the clinic, cradling Milo in my arms, the feeling of helplessness stabbing into my chest like a knife. I used to be the man who could fix anything, but now I couldn't even fix my own son's fever. That night I held Milo as he slept, keeping him close to keep him warm. He was delirious, occasionally whimpering softly. I whispered, "I'm here, Milo. Dad won't let you be alone." I made a silent vow that even if I had to starve, even if I had to sell the last shred of my pride, I wouldn't let my son suffer. From that day on, I started skipping meals. On days when water replaced food, I told Milo I was full, that I preferred drinking water. But every time he smiled, sipping the milk I bought with my last coins, my eyes stung with tears. I grew gaunt, my eyes sunken, but I forced a smile when Milo asked, "Dad, what are we eating today?" I didn't want him to see his father's weakness. I wanted him to believe that even though his mother was gone, his dad was still a solid rock he could rely on. I hid my struggles from my parents. Every time I called, I told them everything was fine, that Milo was healthy, that I was looking for new work. "I'm okay, don't worry," I said, forcing a cheerful tone. But after hanging up, I sat in the dark room, silently sobbing. I didn't want them to know their son was barely scraping by, counting pennies to buy medicine for their grandson. I didn't want them to see me now powerless against my own life. On those freezing winter nights, I sat alone at the table, staring at an empty plate. Milo slept fitfully after his fever, his breathing weak but steady. I clenched my calloused hands, the fingers that once fixed machines and carved toys for my son now trembling from hunger and despair. I whispered to myself, my voice breaking, "I've lost everything." The rented room was cold, devoid of Haley's laughter, of the warm family dinners. It was just me and Milo, two small souls in a world too vast, too cruel. I looked out the window where the faint glow of a streetlight illuminated the snow-covered road and felt like I was falling into a bottomless abyss. I thought of Haley, of the photos she posted with her new man, of the smile that once belonged to me now given to someone else. I thought of the days I sold the truck, the garage, even my wedding ring to save her. All those sacrifices were now a cruel joke. I didn't know how much longer I could keep going, didn't know if I'd ever collapse completely. But then I looked at Milo curled up in his blanket and I knew I couldn't give up. Not for me, but for him. The only light left in the darkness of my life. The days when Milo was sick with fever were the darkest of my life. Seeing him curled up, his lips dry and cracked from the fever, felt like I was being torn apart. But when Milo began to recover, when he managed a weak smile and wrapped his arms around my neck, I realized I couldn't let my pain consume me. Milo needed me, and I needed him. One morning, as rare winter sunlight filtered through the peeling window frame, Milo tugged at my hand, pointing to a drawing he'd made, a tall man holding a wrench, standing next to a little boy. "That's you and me, Dad," he said, his eyes sparkling. "You're a superhero, right?" I smiled, tears welling up, and nodded. "Yeah, I'm your superhero, buddy." In that moment, I knew Milo wasn't just my son. He was my reason to keep breathing, to keep fighting. But I couldn't keep hiding my pain forever. One night, after Milo had fallen into a deep sleep, I sat in the darkness clutching my old phone, my fingers hesitating over my parents' number. I had lied to them too many times, saying everything was fine, that I was managing. But that night I couldn't take it anymore. I called my mom, and as soon as I heard her voice, I broke down. "Mom, Haley left," I choked out. "I've lost everything. All I have left is Milo." My mother sobbed on the other end, her voice trembling. "Luca, my boy, why didn't you tell us sooner? You need us right now." My father, Tiago, the toughest man I've ever known, cut in. "Luca, listen to me. You may have lost everything, but you can't lose your faith. You have Milo. You have these hands of yours. You still have everything." His warm, steady voice, laced with firmness, was like a fire warming my heart in the midst of a blizzard. "Don't let Haley define you, son," he said. "You're Luca Rhodes, and you're stronger than this." His words were like a gentle slap, waking me from the haze of despair. I wiped my tears, nodding even though they couldn't see me. "I'll try, Dad," I whispered. For the first time in months, I felt a small spark of light flicker in my heart. Word of my situation spread, not because I shared it, but because Mason City is a small town where everyone knows each other's business. One afternoon, while I was fixing an old lawnmower in the corner of the rented room, there was a knock at the door. It was Jake, a close friend from high school, along with a few former colleagues from the garage. They brought a bag of groceries, some milk, bread, and a little cash. "Luca, we heard what happened," Jake said, his voice sincere. "You're not allowed to give up, man. Milo needs you, and we need you." I tried to smile, but my throat tightened. I wasn't used to accepting help, always believing I had to stand up on my own. But the looks in Jake's eyes, in the eyes of those who'd worked alongside me, weren't pity. They were trust. They believed that I, Luca Rhodes, could still rise again. Another friend, Dr. Tom, who had treated Milo during his fever, called me to his clinic one weekend. "Bring the boy in, Luca," he said. "I'll check him out for free." I hesitated, my pride urging me to refuse. But when I looked at Milo playing with the wooden toy truck I'd made, I nodded. Tom didn't just examine Milo, he gave me some vitamins and told me to take care of myself. "You're his dad, Luca. You can't fall apart," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. An old colleague, Sam, brought over an old grinder and a few small tools. "Start fixing small stuff," he said. "I know some people who need a mechanic. I'll spread the word." Those small acts, from the bag of groceries to a few encouraging words, were like drops of cool water nourishing the parched ground of my heart. I realized that even though Haley and her family had turned their backs on me, there were still people who believed in me, who were waiting for me to stand tall again. One evening after Milo was asleep, I sat under the dim glow of the yellow light in the rented room. I looked at my calloused hands, scarred from years in the garage, fingers that had once built a workshop from nothing. I remembered the sleepless nights fixing machines, the pride I felt when customers praised my work. I had done it once, so why couldn't I do it again? But this time I wouldn't do it for Haley. I would do it for Milo and for myself. I grabbed an old scrap of paper and started writing a plan. Take on small repair jobs, save every penny, find a way to rent a small space for a new workshop. The words were scrawled messily, but to me they were the first light after months of darkness. I started with the smallest steps. The next morning I took the grinder Sam gave me to a neighbor's house and fixed their lawnmower for a small fee. They paid me with a little cash and a loaf of homemade bread. I brought the bread home, split it with Milo, and watched him grin ear to ear as he devoured it. "It's so good, Dad," he exclaimed, and I laughed. A genuine laugh, the first in months that wasn't forced. I took on more small repair jobs, a water pump, an old engine. Every dollar I earned I carefully tucked into an old tin box, determined to save bit by bit. The road ahead was still long and rough. There were nights I stayed awake worrying about rent, Milo's medicine, and the uncertain future, but I no longer bowed my head in despair. I had a clear goal: to rebuild my life, not to prove anything to anyone, but so Milo could proudly call me his dad. But in those dark days, a new light quietly emerged, and her name was Emma. I first met Emma at Milo's preschool, where I dropped him off and picked him up every day. In those days, I was a shadow of a man, my work clothes stained with grease, my face gaunt from sleepless nights and meals consisting of nothing but water. Other parents often looked at me with pity, or worse, avoided me, as if my misfortune was contagious. I didn't blame them. I knew I looked like a failure, a single father struggling to keep his son fed. But Emma was different. She was a 29-year-old preschool teacher who always greeted me with a gentle, warm smile, like sunlight breaking through a gloomy winter day. "Hi, Luca. Milo was really good today," she'd say, her voice clear and free of judgment. I'd nod, mumbling a few words of thanks, but inside I felt something unfamiliar. It had been a long time since anyone spoke to me without a trace of pity. Emma taught Milo's class, and I quickly realized she wasn't like the others. She was kind, endlessly patient with the children, and especially attentive to Milo. One day, when I was late picking him up because I was fixing a neighbor's water pump, Emma stayed at the school gate, holding Milo's hand and telling him stories to keep him from being scared. "It's okay, Luca," she said when I apologized profusely. "Milo told me about the wooden truck you made him. You're an amazing dad." Her words, simple but sincere, left me speechless. I didn't know how to respond, so I just lowered my head, hiding the tears welling in my eyes. One day, Milo fell ill with a fever during class. Emma called me, her voice worried but calm. "Luca, Milo's not feeling well. Can you come right away?" I dropped everything and ran to the school, my heart pounding with fear. When I arrived, I saw Emma sitting beside Milo, gently wiping his forehead with a damp cloth, softly singing a children's song. Milo lay in her arms, his eyes tired, but managing a small smile when he saw me. "Dad, Miss Emma tells the best stories," he whispered. I hugged Milo tightly, thanking Emma, but she just waved it off, saying, "He needs you, Luca. Take him to the doctor. I'll watch your things." I nodded, overwhelmed with gratitude but unsure how to express it. After that, even when Milo recovered, Emma kept checking in. She noticed the little things, like how I often skipped breakfast to get Milo to school on time, or how I wore the same tattered jacket because I couldn't afford a new one. "Have you had breakfast, Luca?" she asked one morning as I dropped Milo off. I gave an awkward smile, lying that I'd already eaten, but my growling stomach betrayed me. Emma said nothing, just smiled and slipped a sandwich into my hand, saying it was leftover from her breakfast. I wanted to refuse, but the sincerity in her eyes stopped me. "Thank you, Emma," I said, my voice hoarse. For the first time in months, I felt someone genuinely cared, not out of pity, but out of kindness. One evening, as I was tinkering with an old lawnmower under the weak glow of a yellow light, surrounded by rusty tools, there was a knock at the door. Milo was asleep on an old chair, wrapped in a thin blanket. I opened the door, surprised to see Emma standing there, holding a warm box of food and a small bag of vitamins. "I thought Milo might need these," she said softly. "And you too, Luca." I froze, watching her step into the cramped room, her eyes glancing at Milo sleeping and at me, a gaunt, grease-stained man. Emma didn't say anything, just quietly set the food on the table and pulled a small flashlight from her bag. "The light here is too dim," she said, handing it to me. "You shouldn't have to carry everything alone, Luca. Even the strongest people need someone by their side." Her words hit me like a hammer, cracking the wall I'd built around myself. I stayed silent for a long time, unsure how to respond. Deep inside, the wound from Haley's betrayal still ached. I was terrified of trusting again, of opening my heart only to be hurt once more. But Emma's sincerity, her warm eyes, and her gentle voice touched a deep corner of my heart. It wasn't pity, it was empathy, as if she understood what I'd been through, what I was fighting for. "Thank you, Emma," I said, my voice trembling. I'm not used to this." She smiled, resting her hand lightly on my shoulder. "That's okay, Luca. Take your time." From that day on, Emma became a small part of Milo's and my life. She'd stop by, sometimes with homemade cookies, sometimes helping Milo with his drawing assignments from school. Milo adored her, always clinging to her side, excitedly telling her about the wooden toys I made. One day he tugged at her hand and said innocently, "Miss Emma, you're like my mom." I stood there, frozen, unsure how to react. Emma just smiled, ruffling Milo's hair, and looked at me with a gentle gaze. "I'm happy to play with you, Milo," she said, but her eyes seemed to convey something deeper to me. I didn't dare admit it, but something inside me was stirring. Emma wasn't like Haley. She didn't have that dazzling beauty or the glamour that once made me feel inadequate. But she had a sincerity, a warmth I hadn't found in anyone else. Every time she came by, whether with a bit of food or just a simple check-in, the rented room felt less cold. I was still scared, still keeping my distance, but I couldn't deny that Emma was becoming a light in my life, a light I wasn't ready to reach for, but one I didn't want to lose. I started over from nothing, quite literally. No garage, no truck, no possessions. Just my calloused hands and a determination to ensure Milo wouldn't grow up in want. I took on any work I could find, fixing farm equipment for neighbors, welding iron gates, even loading and unloading cargo at the bus depot under Mason City's scorching sun. I rented an old, cramped, dimly lit garage, but it was enough space for the machines I brought with me, and for the faint hope that I could start again. Some days I returned to the rented room exhausted, my hands aching, the smell of machine oil clinging to me. But every time I opened the door and saw Milo run toward me, shouting, "Dad's home." With a radiant smile, my fatigue melted away. I split my earnings in two, one part for milk and food for Milo, the other carefully tucked into an old tin box, dreaming of the day I'd reopen my garage. Emma and Milo were there in the moments I needed them most. Some days, Emma would bring a warm box of food and place it on the table in my rented garage. "You can't work all day without eating," she said, her voice gentle but firm. Milo would sit nearby, playing and cheering. "Dad fixes things so well. Dad's a superhero." I'd smile, my eyes stinging. The meals Emma brought, whether a simple sandwich or a plate of mashed potatoes, became fuel not just for my body but for my heart. She never demanded thanks, but her eyes seemed to say she understood. Understood what I was going through, the burdens I carried on my shoulders. The support didn't come only from Emma. My parents, Tiago and Amara, though far away, quietly sent some of their savings. "Don't refuse it, Luca," Mom said over the phone, her voice choked with emotion. "This is for Milo, for my grandson." Dad repeated firmly, "Take care of yourself, son. Milo needs a healthy father." I wanted to refuse, to say I could manage on my own, but I knew they were right. I accepted the money with deep gratitude, promising to use it for Milo. Emma helped in her own way, too. She introduced me to a few parents at the preschool who needed machinery repairs. "Luca's the best mechanic I know," she told them, and I blushed, unaccustomed to praise. Small jobs started coming in, a tractor here, a water pump there, and I poured my heart into every task, as if each machine was a chance to prove I still had worth. My old colleagues from the garage didn't turn their backs on me either. One day, Sam and a few others showed up with some old tools. "We're not letting you do this alone, Luca," Sam said, clapping me on the shoulder. They spent a few weekends helping me fix machines, refusing any payment. "You're Luca Rhodes," one of them said, his eyes full of trust. "You built a garage from nothing once. You'll do it again." Their words were like a spark reigniting my faith. I wasn't alone anymore. I had Milo, Emma, my parents, and friends who believed in me. After more than a year of scraping by, I saved enough to rent an old shed on the outskirts of Mason City. It wasn't big or modern, just a rusty tin shack with a few second-hand machines I bought from an acquaintance. But to me it was everything. I named it Rhodes Garage, just like before. In the early days I worked day and night, taking on every job, no matter how small, from fixing a lawnmower to fabricating a part for an excavator. I poured sweat, sometimes blood, into my work, but each completed job made me feel alive again. Old customers started coming back, hearing that Luca Rhodes was back. They praised my craftsmanship, saying I was even better than before. Word spread and the garage grew busier. A few years later, Rhodes Garage was no longer just a corner shed. It became one of the top repair and fabrication shops for construction equipment in Mason City. I landed bigger contracts with construction companies and large farms. The profits weren't enough to make me rich, but they were enough to let me breathe easier. I bought a nice house in the suburbs with a spacious yard for Milo to play in, a modern garage for my work, and a room for Milo filled with books and toys. I got a new pickup truck, not to show off, but to make it easier to drive Milo around and haul equipment for the garage. Seeing Milo's beaming smile as he sat in the truck made every hardship worthwhile. I didn't forget my parents. I renovated their old house, installing a new heating system to keep them comfortable. I took them for regular health checkups and even convinced them to join Milo and me on a trip to a small beach in Illinois. Mom hugged me, tears streaming down her face. "My boy, I'm so proud of you." Dad, a man of few words, just clapped my shoulder, his eyes shining with pride. "You did it, Luca," he said. "I knew you would." Those words were the greatest reward I'd ever received. For Milo, I wanted a better future. I enrolled him in a good private school with plenty of books and supplies. But I always taught him, you can have everything, but you have to value the effort it takes to earn it. On weekends, I brought him to the garage, letting him see me work, see the sweat drip as I fixed machines. "This is how Dad makes sure you have milk to drink and books to read," I told him. Milo nodded, his eyes gleaming. "I want to be like you when I grow up." I smiled, ruffling his hair, my heart swelling with happiness. And then there was Emma. In our new home, she became an indispensable part. The warm family dinners with Milo chattering away and Emma smiling gently became a treasure I never thought I'd have again. Weekend picnics where we lay on the grass watching Milo chase butterflies showed me I'd found a true home. It wasn't the flashy illusion I'd had with Haley, but a sincere love built from the hardest days. Emma didn't make grand promises, but she stayed, holding my hand through the storms. To me, that was everything. My life had finally stabilized, no longer defined by counting pennies in a cold rented room. Rhodes' garage was thriving, bringing in enough income for Milo and me to live comfortably, even leaving extra to care for my parents and secure Milo's future. I was no longer the Luca Rhodes of those desperate days, but the scars in my heart remained, reminding me of what I'd lost. I thought the past was behind me, that I could move forward without looking back. But then, one late afternoon, the past returned, sudden and cruel, like a cold wind sweeping through Mason City. I was in the garage, my hands stained with oil, working on an excavator for a big client. The screech of the grinder filled the air, mingling with the sharp smell of burning metal. Milo was at home with Emma, probably drawing or playing with the wooden toys I'd made. I smiled at the thought, my heart lighter knowing he was happy. Then the garage door opened and I heard light footsteps, different from the heavy boots of the workers. I looked up and my heart stopped. Haley stood there right in front of me. She was no longer the radiant, glamorous Haley of years past. She looked worn, gaunt, her eyes shadowed as if she hadn't slept in days. Her once proud golden hair was dull and tangled. The expensive dresses she used to wear had been replaced by a tattered coat with frayed shoulders. I stood frozen, the wrench in my hand nearly slipping to the floor. "Luca," she said, her voice trembling, almost a whisper. Are you okay?" I didn't answer right away, just stared at her, trying to comprehend why she was here after everything that had happened. Haley stepped closer, her hands shaking as if reaching for me, but I stepped back. "I didn't expect you to come back," I said, my voice colder than I'd intended. She lowered her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Luca, I'm sorry," she choked out. "I was wrong. I didn't realize what I'd thrown away." In a halting voice, she told me about the man who'd left her after draining her money, about the high society friends who'd turned their backs when her financial scandals and affair came to light. She spoke of our college days, when I proposed to her by the lake at sunset, when we dreamed of a small family together. "Do you remember, Luca?" she said, trying to take my hand. "We were happy." But her words only soured my heart. The memories she mentioned, the days I held her hand, the nights I cradled Milo and promised her a good life, now felt like knives. She had trampled them without mercy when she left Milo and me for a wealthy man. I looked into her eyes, once capable of melting my heart, but now I saw only emptiness. "You had your chance, Haley," I said, my voice calm but icy. "You chose to leave when Milo and I needed you most. What you lost wasn't just money. It was family. It was trust. Once those things are broken, they can never be whole again." The garage door opened again and Milo ran in, clutching a new drawing with Emma following behind. He stopped short when he saw Haley, his eyes wary. "Mom?" he whispered, but didn't move toward her. My heart ached as I realized Milo still remembered the days I had to lie that his mother was away on business, remembered the sting of abandonment. He hid behind me, refusing Haley's outstretched arms. "Milo, sweetheart, come to Mommy," she said, her voice breaking, but he clung to my shirt, shaking his head. I hugged Milo, stroking his hair, trying to stay calm so he wouldn't be scared. "Go with Miss Emma, buddy," I said softly. Milo nodded and ran out, leaving Haley and me in a heavy silence. A few days later, Caden and Emery Collins appeared. They who had once scorned me now stood at my doorstep, their eyes sheepish. I'd heard about Haley's downfall, and they likely knew of my success. Rhodes' Garage was now a name known across Mason City, and I had built a new home for Milo. But they hadn't come to congratulate me. "Luca, please," Emery said, her voice trembling. Give Haley a chance. She was wrong, but she's still Milo's mother. Caden, who had once called me the mechanic, now lowered his head, muttering, "You're a good man, Luca. Forgive her." I looked at them, the people who had mocked me, who had said I wasn't worthy of their daughter. I wasn't angry, but I felt nothing. Haley made her choice, I said firmly. Milo and I have made ours. She has no place in this life anymore. In that moment, Emma walked over, bringing Milo from the backyard. She didn't speak, didn't show jealousy or harshness, just gently placed her hand on my shoulder. Her steady, warm presence was a reminder that I was no longer alone. Milo held Emma's hand, smiling brightly, and I saw us, Luca, Emma, Milo, as a complete family. Haley looked at us, her eyes shattered. She understood her place was gone forever. She turned away, tears streaming down her face, and said nothing more. Haley left Mason City soon after. I heard she lived alone, abandoned by her lover and shunned by her high society friends. She faced the consequences of her betrayal, isolation, rejection, and the loss of her son and the husband who had sacrificed everything for her. But I felt no joy, no satisfaction. I only felt relief, as if a heavy door to the past had finally closed. I looked at Emma and Milo, the ones who had stood by me through the darkest days, and I knew I had found those who were truly worthy. One peaceful afternoon, I sat on the steps of our new house in the suburbs of Mason City, the soft golden sunlight stretching across the lawn. Milo was running around chasing a ball, his clear, joyful laughter echoing like a melody. Emma stood at the edge of the yard, smiling gently, her hair glowing in the afternoon light. "Milo, be careful not to fall," she called, her voice full of love. I watched them, my heart swelling with a peace I once thought I'd never feel again. This house, with its spacious yard and modern garage, was more than a place to live. It was a home, a place where I rediscovered the meaning of happiness after months that felt shrouded in darkness. Emma and I didn't need grand vows or promises. Our love wasn't built on extravagant romantic moments, but forged in the hardest of times. She stood by me when I had nothing but my calloused hands and a small son. She brought warm meals, words of encouragement, and above all, a sincerity I thought had vanished from the world. One evening at dinner, Milo suddenly jumped from his chair, ran to Emma, and hugged her, innocently calling, "Mom, tell me a story." I froze, the spoon in my hand nearly falling to the table. Emma looked at me, her eyes a mix of shy warmth and radiance. "All right, buddy," she said, ruffling Milo's hair. I smiled, tears welling up. In that moment, I knew our family was whole again, in a new way, not replacing what was lost, but building something more beautiful, more enduring. I never forgot my parents, Tiago and Amara, who planted seeds of hope in me when I was at rock bottom. They didn't just give me strength, they taught me lessons about patience and family. Every weekend I brought Milo to visit them. Lately, Emma often came along. She'd bring homemade pies, and after just a few visits, my mother loved her like a daughter. In the small kitchen, the two women would chat and bake together. Mom beamed, saying, "What a talented girl. You're lucky, Luca." Emma blushed, replying softly, "I just want to help a little, ma'am." My father, usually a man of few words, made Emma a cup of coffee that day, something he'd never done for anyone outside the family. I bought my parents small but practical gifts: a comfortable armchair for Dad to read in, a warm sweater for Mom for the winter. And for the first time in years, I threw Mom a surprise birthday party at their old house. Milo made a card by hand, and Emma helped me bake a cake and decorate. When Mom smiled radiantly, hugging Milo under the warm glow of the lights, my heart felt lighter than ever. "You've overcome everything, Luca," Mom said, her voice choked but joyful. Dad, as usual, didn't say much, just gripped my hand tightly before I left, a grip that spoke 1,000 words of pride. As we drove away from their house, Emma quietly took my hand, smiling. "I understand now why you're so strong," she said. I replied softly, "Because they're the home I'll always return to. They weren't just parents, they were my anchor, the flame reminding me that family is the most precious thing, surpassing all pain. Sitting on the steps, I looked back on my journey. I remembered the days I went hungry to save Haley, the nights I held Milo in that cold rented room, the times I counted every penny to buy his medicine. I remembered the sting of abandonment, of betrayal when my trust shattered like glass. But I also recognized the lessons etched deep into my soul. True love cannot be bought with money, nor can it survive without trust. Betrayal can destroy a home, but it cannot break a person who chooses to rise. And true wealth isn't in possessions, but in resilience, in family, in the sincerity of those who stay by your side when the world turns its back. My story closes on another afternoon at Rhodes Garage. I sat there with Milo and Emma, sunlight streaming through the window, glinting off the sweat on my hands. Milo was drawing, chattering about a new wooden truck he wanted me to make. Emma sat beside him, smiling gently, her hand softly smoothing his messy hair. I looked at them and smiled, a smile free of strain, free of pain. I thought back to the days when I had nothing, when I believed I'd never stand again. But now, all that suffering had become the foundation for a new me, stronger, more resilient, and more complete than ever. I want to share with you, the reader of this story, a simple but profound message forged through those years. Never take for granted those who give their all for you, because if you lose them, you lose what's most valuable. Betrayal may bring someone to their knees, but it can also transform them into a better, stronger version of themselves. And most importantly, true love isn't in grand promises, expensive gifts, or fleeting glamour. True love is staying, holding hands through the darkest times, and building a home together from the broken pieces of life. 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 Pieces of life.